Today on Let It Rip Weekend, 2 days of public hearings into the possible impeachment of President Trump now in the books.
The member of my staff could hear President Trump on the phone asking Ambassador Sondland about the investigations. Ambassador Sondland told President Trump the Ukrainians were ready to move forward.
In mid-August, it became clear to me that Giuliani's efforts to gin up politically motivated investigations were now infecting U.S. engagement with Ukraine.
How could our system fail like this? How is it that foreign corrupt interests could manipulate our government?
3 key witnesses providing details about the president's alleged quid pro quo. President Trump giving his opinion on the historic hearing.
These are very dishonest people. Democrats are trying to overthrow the last election because they know they're not going to win the next election.
Meantime, the halls of Congress full of finger-pointing.
What President Trump has done on the record makes what Nixon did look almost small.
I think what Republicans are doing is standing up for the Constitution.
But after 2 days of testimony, has there been a smoking gun or just a whole lot of smoke? The debate starts right now. Good morning. It is time to let it rip. All right, let's introduce the guest for right now. She's been in Congress since 2015. One of the most Democratic districts in the state. Welcome, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. By the way, happy birthday coming up this week. Is that right?
That's true. Thank you, Charlie.
All right, to her left, on our set only, that is. He has been in Congress since 2016 in one of the most Republican districts in the state. Congressman Paul Mitchell is here. And happy birthday to you just a couple of days ago.
Thanks, Charlie. I appreciate it.
Celebrating your birthdays. Okay, first of all, thanks for being over here. Debbie Dingell, let me start with you. Hearings, historic hearings, some of them are calling them this week. Any surprises by the 3 witnesses in the impeachment hearings?
Well, I think one of the most disturbing instances was when the Ambassador Yanovich was testifying that the president actually tweeted at her, which I think was a form of intimidation. And a symbol of what's been wrong with this administration for 3 years. I'm really worried about how divided this country is, what's happening to our language, the lack of civility. And it was just, even Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who's one of the most conservative members of the House, said it was inappropriate.
Is it inappropriate tweeting during the testimony of one of the witnesses?
Charlie, you've known me for a while, and I've never been a person that believes in attacking people. I think it's inappropriate to do so. I don't think it's intimidation. If you intimidate somebody, let's go. You can do a better job than that. But I think it's inappropriate to attack people. I've said that all along. Nothing's changed my opinion on that. It should be about policy, it should be about perspectives, and leave the other stuff be.
But it's going to be one of the, I don't know if it's going to be another part of the impeachment process, but certainly the ambassador was intimidated. She said it. Does that's not a good thing for the president,
well,
is it?
The ambassador is a sympathetic figure, but the reality is we have to remember the ambassador serves at the will, at the pleasure of the president. He could have replaced her at any point in time. He should have done so if he was displeased. He didn't need a whole separate effort with Rudy and company out there doing their own thing and then replace her. He should have done so. He didn't, but the idea that somehow poor me, she's been an ambassador or a charge of affairs in multiple countries. It's not a spring chicken on this. Let's be adult here.
Let's take a look at look right here at this first cut from the hearing this week, and let's get your reaction, Congresswoman. Let's play this first one.
You see why maybe the president was a little concerned about what went on in Ukraine, and you couple that with the corruption level that we know exists in Ukraine, you add to that this idea that he's not a big fan of foreign aid.
The president has a right to fire or hire any ambassador he wants, and maybe there was a reason why Ambassador Yovanovitch was out, wasn't doing enough to get rid of corruption or making the right questions. True?
I think that the evidence is showing that that's the exact opposite, which is one of the most disturbing things. I agree with Paul that the president could replace an ambassador. He does have that right. Although I want to say to you, one of the things we need to worry about, and one of the most disturbing trends that I've seen over the last 3 years, is the demoralization of professional foreign service officers and what's happening to our standing worldwide. And as we've been seeing in these hearings, there has been a lot of question about whether the prosecutor was pursuing cleaning up the government, etc., and money was withheld from this country.
Let's talk about that quickly, because I think Elise Stefanik asked some questions that are very important. She asked her about the Ukrainian officials coming out and criticizing candidate Trump a series of times. And she asked Yovanovitch, who was there, did you talk with them about interfering with our elections at any point in time? She asked her multiple ways. The answer is no. This is the United States ambassador in the Ukraine, one of the most corrupt countries in the world, who's interfering in our elections. And by the way, they're all worried about that. She didn't once say to the Ukrainian officials, including the president, hey, that's not appropriate. So to say she's an effective representative of our government, I'm not sure she is. The way he did it didn't make sense to me. But let's not hold her up as some bastion of an ambassador.
But she was an ambassador under 2 Republican presidents and 1 Democratic president.
She wasn't doing her job the last last administration. You can't criticize our country and have the ambassador sit there and say, oh, that's okay.
And that was the point I think that the president was making.
Condoleezza Rice, who I think all of us would agree was a very competent, good Secretary of State, has said what has been happening crosses a line.
Let's take a look at this next bite over here. Let's just play the next one here. And I want Congressman Mitchell, why don't you comment on this one here?
Ambassador, if you had remained as ambassador of Ukraine, would you have recommended to the president that he ask a new president of Ukraine to, quote, find out about Biden's son?
No.
I think this is really interesting here about the Bidens and where they play a role. Maybe this is a better question directed to you, but don't you think that Joe Biden is really taking a big hit in these hearings?
Let's step back to asking the question that was posed by the Democrat questioner. It's absolutely appropriate for the president to be concerned about $500 million in federal aid going to Ukraine and make sure it's being used appropriately, not part of corruption. And it's a very corrupt country. However, and I do say however, it's inappropriate for the president to specifically reference political opponents as part of investigating corruption. It simply is not appropriate.
That's why he's being impeached.
But let's go to impeachment. Impeachment is high crimes and misdemeanors, not a political act, not a political whack job. The question is it a high crime misdemeanor? At this point in time, that hasn't been demonstrated, in my opinion. It's inappropriate. It's not impeachable.
Well, but it's an easy way out, though. But if you're conditioning foreign aid that we heard was desperately needed by Ukraine, and you condition that upon getting some dirty work on your opponent, isn't that why we're here?
You know, one of the things I know, we both know, I'm not on any of the committees that are investigating this. I'm doing my other work. We're doing things like lowering the cost of prescription drugs. We're trying to do that. Yeah. But yesterday was the first witness that actually testified from this administration in a closed-door session from the Office of Management and Budget about why the money was held up, when the money was held up, the process. We authorized it and appropriated it from the Congress. And Ukraine is critical to us protecting our foreign interests. So I'm going to be curious what came out of that testimony and what's told. These hearings are happening so that we are getting the facts.
Why don't you answer the question? Is there a high crime and misdemeanor so far?
I'm waiting to see what. I am deeply disturbed by what I've seen. That's why we're having these hearings. But that is why we're hearing from everybody. I want to hear from Josh Bolton. There are a lot of witnesses I want to hear from this administration so I can answer that question.
Do you think Biden took a hit on these hearings?
I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. You're just doing exactly what the president wants us to do. And, you know,
but his standing in the polls are going down, though.
But, again, you're taking a process. This is a serious historic effort. We should not view impeachment as some kind of a political adventure. It shouldn't be a circus. The reality is 22 years ago we impeached a president for perjury, for obstruction of justice, for using the office of the presidency to take advantage of a 22-year-old. 6 Democrats voted in favor, 47 against. I'm sorry. There are 6 Democrats voting in favor. The reality is they couldn't impeach that president with a clear. He lost his law license. Yeah. The reality is let's not use a process that is intended to be a safety valve in our Constitution when someone does something that's clearly immoral and blatantly illegal, and say, if we don't like your policy, your politics, your political rallies, your Twitter, God knows, that we're going to impeach you.
But it certainly is disturbing, though, that there seems to be at least a phone call out there that the president seems to be talking, though, about this quid pro quo. Whether it rises or
you know, some people call it bribery. We need to see how these hearings play out. We need the recommendations. I'm deeply disturbed by what we're seeing and what's happening to our country by what these actions are.
Do you know how bribery became the discussion? The DCCC did focus groups in a variety of states about what was the best language to use. The DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, what language would best be effective with voters to talk about impeachment. That's why it's now changed from quid pro quo to bribery, is that sells better.
I read a statistic, 68% of the public, though, they're viewing these hearings, but whether or not their opinions are being changed, that's the big issue. All right, a little bit more on this when we come back, but I want to get to some other issues about what Congress is doing.
Please.
If Congress,
we would like that.
Yeah, great.
We think that's great.
They love it.
Because we're doing other things.
They are.
Maybe.
We'll see about that. All right, quick break. When we come back, more with two esteemed members of Congress.
If this is not impeachable conduct, what is?
This is a carefully orchestrated media smear campaign.
About additional witnesses or make a request for a vote on additional witnesses following the witness testimony.
And Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order under HRES 660.
Okay, all right, I could watch this all day. A lot of people did. 68% of the public, not 60%, it was on all the stations, so a lot of people were watching this, but will it change any opinions? All right, welcome back to Let It Rip. Debbie Dingell is with us here, and Paul Mitchell, our Congress people from this area. I want to come back to that in a minute, but let me just change. Do you guys know the Schiff? You guys know him?
I know Adam very well.
Yeah.
What's I think he's excellent. I think he's trying to, you know what we need to be doing right now? Part of your problem is, I think we can disagree agreeably, and right now the American people are acting like let it rip across the country every day.
What's wrong with let it rip?
But I love let it rip, but you know, sometimes we need, this is serious. I mean, that's one thing we both agree on. This is a very serious time for this country.
Be honest. Do you think these hearings are going to change anybody's mind?
They're going to change some people's opinion.
It's not the American people. It's extremes on either end of things that wish to rev things up. I think there's a big part in the middle that says, oh, please stop and do something productive. Do something for America for once. I think the majority of the American people are saying this chaos in Washington is absolutely useless. It's a waste of time, money, and energy. Most of them are turning off these national news programs. They're tired of hearing them. So
You know, I said that, I told you 3 years ago Donald Trump was going to become president.
Yeah, you did.
And why did I tell you he was going to become president? American people were tired of everybody fighting and not getting anything done. Well, Donald Trump has put kerosene on the fire of people fighting and not getting things done. And that's a problem.
You were the subject of a Donald Trump tweet not too long ago. Were you intimidated?
I froze. I was like, I mean, I got scared to death. Then I got mad. And I called everybody I knew. And if he had listened to what I had said, I actually agreed with him on many of things. But I said the problem was, it was about China. I got asked on Fox about China. And I said, you know what? The president's right. That they steal our intellectual property. They manipulate their currency. They subsidize their goods to this country.
Sounds like Trump.
But his policy is chaotic all over the place, and you can't follow it.
Let me
and that's the problem. Everything right now with this administration is chaotic. We should be worried about what's happening in this country.
The chaos is not limited to 1600. Let's be honest about it. The little place we roam around has got more than a share of chaos.
There's a lot of chaos. Let me talk about some of the chaos here. The city of Detroit this week, City Council is going to be voting on a $250 million bond proposal to raise money for demolition. The idea is that they would take care of a lot of the abandoned homes. But your colleague, Brenda Lawrence, wants it costs about $70 million to do some soil looking to see if there's contamination of the soil. Is that a good idea?
You know, I don't know enough about the issue, and one thing I've learned, if I don't know enough about the issue, I'm not going to comment on it. You know, it's under, I'll let my colleague over here.
Why is it that if every city across the country came up with some idea they had to do something and then immediately went to the feds and say, send us money, let's be serious about this. If that's something that they're going to do, then they should ask the state to assist them first. That's the way it works. With a system with this, they need to call Governor Whitmer and say, hey, we need some assistance here. And then, you know, if there's a federal part of that, we'll talk about it. But you can't turn to the federal government every time you want, you know, get the credit card out.
I know, but what about this saying that Detroit, well, you need to have a good Detroit so the state of Michigan can succeed? That's true. And demolition and crime and all that helps.
We do want to have a good Detroit, but I'm going to tell you something. We are a region. And I want Detroit to do well. I support all the efforts of Detroit, but I got to tell you, I got downrivers that are like, what about us? And we need to take care of Detroit. And Macomb County, Oakland County, we're a region. Port Huron, St. Clair, where I grew up, in his district now. We need to take care. There's nothing anti-Detroit about either of us, actually.
What about,
but we need to worry about the region.
Here, let me stop. We're talking about doing soil testing in Detroit and wanting $70 million for that. And there are people that are advocating for putting a gravel pit directly adjacent to a Superfund site in Metamora. I mean, but they're actually working on state legislation on that. I've talked to the governor about it. So we're concerned about soil in Detroit, and we're talking about potentially spreading contaminants in Metamora. I mean, at some point we got to get our head together.
We got to worry about all of it.
What about fix the damn roads? Is there congressional money to fix the roads here in Michigan?
We should have done infrastructure 3 years ago. The president said he was going to do it, and he hasn't. But
I sat on the Infrastructure and Transportation Committee, and I met with recently Peter DeFazio. I put an op-ed out you may have seen on creating a federal infrastructure investment fund to, in fact, raise money, to use separate from appropriations, to put money to states as block grant for states to match states and communities. There has to be a match. We can't expect the federal government to fund everything that's just a problem. So there's a match, and then they decide what best way to use it, because it's not just roads. It's waterways, it's sewers, it's rural broadband, a whole range.
However, we do need to, at the federal level, act on infrastructure as well and put together a plan.
We do, and what they're talking about doing right now is cobbling together a couple of things on water and calling it an infrastructure program. We need to stop with these little Band-Aids and actually have a national infrastructure effort.
Well, we know how much it is. It's in the billions of dollars.
But you got to put together a program. Our infrastructure is worse than a third world country right now. I mean, and it relates to everything.
Mostly in our districts here, not up north. It's nice up there.
The country is. You want to talk? What about their lead pipes up north? People are.
But some of those counties.
It's not just roads. Infrastructure is about water delivery systems. It's about sewer systems. It's about broadband. It is. We are third country, and it's hurting and damaging our economic advantages.
Some of those counties up north have done millages to, in fact, fix their local roads, to work with local roads. They've actually funded it because they needed to do it, and that's something that was a priority. It hasn't been able to be done some others around the metro area for a lot of reasons.
All right, let's hold that thought right there. Besides the impeachment hearings and a lot more going on in Congress, we're going to have final thoughts from our panel when we come back. All right, time for final thoughts. Let's start with Congressman Paul Mitchell. On the impeachment, what's going to happen?
Well, I think for certain, I've said for a while, we're on the path to an impeachment vote. I think we'll do that the week of December 16th, just to add a little extra flair to the Christmas holidays. I think we'll have a vote. My guess is, and Debbie would make no better, they'll vote to impeach and send it out to the Senate. I think we've got better things to do. I think it's a mistake to handle it this way, but we don't, that those votes will be counted, and I guess it'll go to the Senate as impeachment.
Let me get to on the impeachment. Final thought on the impeachment.
I think we have a process that is open, transparent. We need to get the facts. You follow the facts. Nobody's above the law. But then I'm going to talk about what's happening in Congress. And neither of us are on those committees. We all made a promise.
But just so I'm clear, you guys do have to vote on impeachment. The whole Congress will
no, you have to. So when these hearings are done, they'll make a recommendation. It then goes to the House Judiciary Committee. They will vote or not vote to send forward a recommendation, and then...
But there were a large number of, there were more than half a dozen witnesses that were proposed by the Republicans that were rejected by the Democrats.
Not half a dozen. Not half a dozen. There are two. Hunter Biden was total, pure games playing. So
you don't want to hear Hunter Biden testify, do you?
I don't. I want to fair and open, transparent process. But you know what I'm doing, Charlie? I'm working on the issues that people want. I'm not on those committees. We all made a promise. The president, he and I, we're going to lower the cost of prescription drugs. We're going to bring cost of prescription drugs. We're going to consider PFAS legislation next week. It's still on the NDAA. We're going to pass PFAS legislation out of committee next week and work on getting something done for the floor. And for the American people, I sincerely hope that the president doesn't shut the government down on next week when it expires.
The same
but
day
then,
as the vote
just
for
in case you mark it here, I'm giving you the next drama theater we will see is that when and if, and I pray the president doesn't decide not to sign it, if we keep the government open, the next date is December 20th that it will expire. And you will see drama in theater like you haven't seen, which is why we shouldn't be doing it this way.
Debbie, last term we made a 2-year agreement on the budget and appropriations. That, in fact, is now being overhauled. So if you want to say let's not have the president blow it up, let's also not have Nancy and the chair of the appropriations decide that they
haven't we been passing bills? How many appropriation bills have been passed and are sitting in the Senate waiting for action?
They were passed with hardly any Republican votes, if any. The reality is we had a 2-year budget agreement. We had a 2-year budget agreement. If we adhere to it, this would be over, and we'd actually have appropriations bills for the whole year, which we don't have.
What's going to happen on December 16th, though? If there's not anything to vote on, what's going to happen?
Well, we've got 2 things we have to. We've got 2 things I think we're going to do that we
same week.
Same week as the impeachment vote. I understand.
We had a 2-year budget and appropriations deal that now is being rejiggered.
It's got to be rejiggering it. Is the Senate acting on any of these? No. There are 300+ bills that have been passed by the House are sitting in the Senate waiting for action. You want to know what made me madder than anything? That Mitch McConnell. Now I am. He said we were boring, so I'm not going to be boring anymore. When I'm on television and get told Mitch McConnell has just said the House can't go on vacation for a year and do nothing, the House has passed 300+ bills, some of which are really important, and the Senate hasn't acted on any of them.
Hold on, hot diggity dog here.
We're not boring.
The reality is that you have a Democrat House, Republican Senate, and a Republican President. If anybody wanted to get anything done, they triangulate so they actually had some agreement rather than try to pass bills that are messaging.
We are passing bills that are not violence against women.
They're going to continue to fight. Go to FoxNewsDetroit.com for all the news today. See you later. Bye-bye.